Hey moms, this is lesson 4 of Momtography 101. I'm so proud that you've made it this far. Hopefully you're starting to see some progress in your photos. This week I'm going to talk about two things that will hopefully make a pretty big difference in your pictures. This would be white balance and metering. So what is white balance and metering? White balance is simply the balance of colors in your photo. There are a couple of terms that I want you to understand when we're talking about white balance. The first is the temperature of your photo. This would be whether it tends to lean towards the yellow side, the warmer side, or the blue side, which is a more cool tone. The second term you need to know is the tint. This is whether your photos lean more towards the pink side or more towards green. The combination of these colors or these sliders is what makes up your white balance. So why is it important to shoot with accurate white balance? Well, for one, this helps you in post-processing or editing so that it takes away part of that work. If you can get it right straight out of camera, you won't have to spend time in Lightroom or your editing software fixing the white balance. Metering also goes with this. Metering is simply getting accurate exposure straight out of camera. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO are all things that come into play when it comes to the overall exposure of your picture. There's actually a tool in your camera that tells you if your exposure is correct. This would be your meter. So the meter is whenever you look into the viewfinder of your camera, you hold down your shutter speed, there's a little bar graph with what I like to call the little ticker. And the little ticker moves as you adjust your settings. So if you adjust your shutter speed to make it faster or slower, your little ticker will move to the right or to the left. And so this is really important to understand that whenever it's centered, that means your white balance is accurate. Now, there are a few ways that you can get your white balance set in your camera, and the one that I like to use is the Expodisc. This tool involves your white balance as well as your metering. So all it is it's simply a filter looking thing that you put in front of your camera lens. There's this sort of beehive looking end that goes outside, and the plain white side goes to your camera lens, obviously without your lens cap on. So to use your Expodisc, you're going to put it over your camera lens. You're going to go stand next to your subject, because we want to measure your white balance in the light that's hitting your subject. You're simply going to stand next to your subject, hold the Expodisc over your lens, and you're going to meter to 0 before snapping your picture. So what does that look like, metering to 0? Well, like we talked about in the lesson talking about aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, the way that I set my settings is I set my aperture first and then don't touch it. Then I set my shutter speed, generally around 160, 1 over 160, and then my ISO. Then I go back to my shutter speed, and here's why. There's a little knob on the top of your camera. Mine's a Canon, so there's a knob on top of my camera that whenever I turn it, that adjusts my shutter speed automatically. And so when I'm holding down the shutter but not pressing it all the way, I can adjust the knob to get the little ticker to be centered. And you can look into your viewfinder as you're adjusting the shutter speed, faster or slower, your little ticker is moving. So if your little ticker is closer to the left side, that means it's too dark. So you need to lower your shutter speed or raise your ISO. If your little ticker is more towards the right side, that means it's too bright. So you need to raise your shutter speed to allow less light in or lower your ISO. So again, we're next to our subject. We have the Expodisc over our lens. We're gonna hold down the shutter, and then we're gonna meter to 0. Get the little ticker right in the middle under 0. When it's centered, click and snap your picture, okay? The next step is that you're gonna go into your settings and go to custom white balance. So automatically your camera is set to auto white balance. And what this does is your camera is taking an educated guess of the white balance based on the surroundings. Now it does get it right sometimes, but in my personal experience, most of the time it's slightly off. Sometimes it's dramatically off. So you want to change the auto white balance to custom white balance. And it kind of looks like two little ramps with a circle in the middle. So that's custom white balance. You set your camera to custom white balance, and then you're going to choose where it pulls the white balance from. That picture that we just took with your Expodisc over your lens, that's the picture that we want to use for the camera to pull white balance from. So you're gonna go into your settings, and I'll drop in tomorrow's post. I'll show you the step-by-step of how to get to that in your menu, but you're gonna navigate in your menu to select your custom white balance photo, or where it's pulling the custom white balance from. So once you select that photo, it should be set. So then all you have to do is go stand away from your subject and turn your camera towards your subject, and when you snap your picture, your white balance and exposure should be perfect. Now sometimes I personally like mine just a little bit brighter because I'm that light and airy photographer, so I may up it even just slightly in Lightroom, but in camera it's a whole lot closer because I'm telling the camera what to do. And so whenever you take those pictures, it's such a great feeling to be able to go in your playback and look at your photos, and they look almost perfect. And so that's what the Expodisc does. It allows you to get that correct white balance and the correct exposure at the same time. The next way that you can get accurate white balance is to use what's called a gray card. So this gray card is 18% gray. That's just the color, or the amount of white or gray that's in this color specifically. When you use a gray card, you have your subject hold it next to their face. That way it's pulling the white balance that's closest to your subject, same as when we stand next to our subject with our Expodisc. So have your subject hold the gray card next to their face. Next, you're gonna come up close with your camera and take a picture the same way we do with our Expodisc of just the gray card. You want the gray card to fill the whole screen. You're gonna come up to your subject, make sure this gray card fills your whole screen. You're gonna hold down your shutter and meter to 0, get that little ticker to 0, whether that's adjusting the shutter speed or the ISO, and then snap your picture. And then follow those same steps in the custom white balance to get those settings to have the camera pull from that picture. Another way that you could do it is fix it in post-processing. So you have your subject hold the gray card next to their face, you snap just a regular picture, and then you take the rest of your photos in auto white balance. So whenever you snap that original picture, it'll be in auto white balance. When you go into Lightroom or your editing software, you can select the white balance to pull from this gray card. So there's a little dropper tool. You select the dropper tool and you just click on this color and it should automatically adjust your white balance. From there, you can have that copy over to all of your photos, and that's a pretty quick fix. The last thing that we're gonna talk about is shooting in Kelvin. Kelvin is another way that you can adjust white balance automatically, but it doesn't involve a tool. So you don't have to use an Expodisc and you don't have to use a gray card. So all it is Kelvin is a setting that's, again, you go to your auto white balance and you can select where you would select the custom, you select Kelvin. So whenever you click that, that Kelvin setting, it has a number like 5200. So the higher your number goes, the warmer the picture will be. The lower the number goes, the cooler your picture will be. And so you're gonna wanna go in live mode, which means that on the back of your camera, your picture shows there. So go in live mode and then adjust your Kelvin from there so that you can see what the camera is picking up, because when you look through the viewfinder, you don't see the settings in play until you see it in the replay. When you go in live mode, you can see the settings at work already. So when you're in live mode, you're gonna select Kelvin and take a look at what it's seeing. If your picture is too blue or too cool, head up, raise your number higher. If your white balance is too warm, then you can lower that Kelvin number. So this week, practice getting your white balance correct straight out of camera and metering so that your exposure is also correct. I think that you're gonna see a great outcome from your photos just by putting these two things into play. Add into the things that we've already talked about, like your choice of background and lighting, as well as your correct camera settings, and I'm sure that you're gonna get photos that you love. I can't wait to see all the practice shots that you guys do. Don't forget to post your practice shots in the Facebook group so that the rest of us can see your progress, can give you some pointers. If you have questions, let me know, and I would love to answer and help you out. Have a great week.